Donna hobbled toward the park bench, her crutches tapping gently on the pavement with every step. When she finally reached it, she lowered herself down slowly and carefully lifted her casted right leg, wrapped in white plaster up to the knee, onto the seat beside her. She leaned back, exhaled, and looked around the park. She had spent the entire day at the Smithsonian Museums, trying to cover as much ground as possible on her own. Being on crutches was more challenging than she'd expected. She had to stop frequently, her hands hurt, her shoulders ached, and yet, through the strain, she felt something else, something she didn't quite understand, but welcomed with curiosity. Donna wasn't injured. She had put the cast on herself the night before flying to Washington, D.C. It wasn't some prank or a cry for attention. It was personal, a decision she had delayed for years. For as long as she could remember, she'd been fascinated by recovery, by limitations, by the quiet strength that people seem to radiate when they move through the world more slowly. She had never broken a bone in her life, but she often wondered what it might feel like to be physically slowed down, to rely on crutches, to be noticed in a different way. This trip alone, anonymous, was her chance to find out. Sitting there on that park bench, her leg propped up, and her fingers resting over the cool cast, she felt something settle inside her. Peace, maybe, or just a kind of presence she rarely allowed herself to feel. And this was only the beginning. As she sat quietly, Donna adjusted her ponytail and glanced at her toes peeking out of the cast. They were the only part of her lower leg she could still move, and there was something strange, but grounding about that limited freedom. She wiggled them slowly, thinking about how this small detail had already changed the way she moved, the way she existed in space. Wearing the cast changed everything. Every step had to be considered. Every incline, every doorway, every staircase now required planning. It made her more aware of her body, of the environment, of the people around her. She was no longer just passing through the world, she was engaging with it on a different level, and the world was engaging with her too. Since the moment she left her apartment, people had looked at her differently. Airport attendants had offered help, passengers had moved to make space for her leg on the plane, strangers on the street glanced at her longer than usual. Was it curiosity, concern, something deeper? Donna wasn't sure, but she noticed. She noticed everything now. Standing up from the bench, she planted her crutches in the gravel and began walking toward the Museum of Modern Art. The cast tugged slightly on her thigh with each step, reminding her of its weight. It wasn't painful, it was deliberate, and for once in her life, Donna wasn't rushing anywhere. As she crutched slowly down the path, she noticed a man sitting on a nearby bench glance at her, then quickly away. A few steps later, another man passed by and gave her a second look. She didn't mind it. It felt honest, visible. For the first time in a long time, Donna felt like she was exactly where she needed to be, even if she wasn't sure why. The museum lobby was quiet when Donna entered, the cool air brushing against her skin as she paused to regain her balance. She adjusted her grip on the crutches and scanned the space. Tall ceilings, marble floors, soft footfalls, echoing through corridors lined with sculptures and modern canvases. She moved slowly, methodically, absorbing every detail. As she passed through exhibits, she felt the familiar weight of the cast, pulling gently at her leg, slowing her, grounding her. And yet, she didn't feel like a tourist anymore. She felt like part of the scene, like her presence added something unusual, something that interrupted the normal rhythm of things. Not in a disruptive way, but in a way that made others look twice. Her gaze moved across the room, where a large abstract painting held her attention. She stood still, just long enough to hear a soft shuffle behind her. That same man again, brown hair, late 20s, polite distance. She had noticed him in a previous gallery. Now here he was again, not close enough to speak, not far enough to be coincident. She moved into another room, lined with colorful lithographs. A few minutes later, she heard his footsteps behind her again. Donna sat down on a cushioned bench, resting the crutches carefully against the wall. She tilted her casted leg across the seat and sighed. Then she looked up. The man was there on the opposite end of the room, pretending to examine a Jasper Johns piece, but clearly sneaking glances in her direction. His gaze kept returning to her leg, not in a lewd way, just curious. Donna smiled to herself. This was new, and something inside her whispered, "Ask him." "Excuse me," Donna called out gently across the room, her voice soft but clear. "Do you happen to have the time?" The man looked up, a bit startled. He blinked and glanced at his 3 o'clock, he replied, his voice calm, almost relieved to be spoken to. Donna smiled. "Thanks. I'm definitely moving slower than I thought today," she said, nodding subtly toward her cast. He chuckled and took a few steps closer, unsure at first, then growing more confident. "What happened?" he asked, pointing gently toward her leg. She paused only a second. "Softball. Took a bad step on second base." "Oof," he winced. "How long do you have to wear it?" 6 weeks, she said, delivering the answer with a practiced sigh. "It was a rough sprain." He nodded again. "I'm Tony, by the way," he said, extending a hand. "Donna." She shook it, her grip firm but friendly. "Can I buy you a drink or a coffee? There's a cafe just outside the main hall," he offered, his tone kind but casual. Donna hesitated for a heartbeat, then smiled. "Sure, I'd like that." They walked side by side, her crutches clicking softly, his hands occasionally motioning toward art pieces as they passed. The cafe was modest, with small metal tables and a few students sipping espresso. Donna found a seat and gently lifted her casted leg onto a nearby chair, easing into the rhythm of the moment. Tony returned with 2 cold drinks and sat across from her. "Is this your first time in DC?" "It is," she said. "My spring break trip." "And you're touring on crutches?" he asked, raising a brow with amusement. Donna laughed lightly. "Yeah, makes everything more memorable, I guess." Tony smiled. "You're handling it better than most would." Hey, if you're enjoying this story so far and love content with real emotion and unexpected human connection, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and leave a comment below. Would you ever do something bold just to understand yourself better? They sipped their drinks quietly for a moment, the kind of silence that didn't feel awkward, just thoughtful. Donna watched the museum visitors come and go through the cafe window, feeling strangely grounded. "So," Tony said, "has it been hard getting around with the cat?" Donna glanced at her leg and gave a soft nod. "Yeah, it's slower. Everything takes more effort, but weirdly, I don't mind it." Tony tilted his head, intrigued. "You make it seem almost peaceful." She shrugged. "Maybe it is." He smiled at her. Not a grin, not a smirk, just a smile that said he understood something unspoken. "You know," he said carefully, "I wore a cast when I was a kid, broke my leg falling off my bike. At first I hated it, but after a while it became familiar, safe almost." Donna looked at him. The honesty in his voice surprised her. There was no performance, no embellishment, just a memory laid bare. "That's interesting," she said. "Not many people would say they liked it." Tony chuckled. "Well, I didn't like it exactly, but it changed how I saw things, how others saw me. I still remember how different life felt, moving slower, depending on others." She nodded, slowly. "It's funny, I think we don't realize how much we rush through things until we're forced to stop." They paused again, sipping their drink. Then Tony looked at her, his voice softer this time. "Can I ask something a little weird?" Donna raised an eyebrow playfully. "Sure. Was there a part of you that wanted this to happen?" he asked, pointing lightly toward her leg. Donna's heart skipped. Her fingers tightened slightly around her drink. He didn't say it to tease her. He wasn't mocking her. He was curious, just like she had been. And for the first time, she considered telling the truth. Donna stared into her cup for a moment, letting the question hang in the air. Then, without looking up, she answered. "Yes," she said quietly. "I guess a part of me did." Tony didn't flinch. He didn't lean back or laugh or ask why. He simply waited. "I've always been curious," she continued, her voice low but steady. "Not about pain or anything dramatic, just the experience, the way something like this changes how people move through the world, how they're seen, how they feel about themselves." She looked up. His eyes hadn't changed, still calm, still listening. "I never told anyone that," she added. "Not even my best friend." Tony nodded. almost like he was grateful she said it. "I get it," he said. "You do? More than you'd expect," he said with a half smile. "There's something about it being slowed down, being visible in a different way. It's not about wanting to be hurt, it's just a new way of seeing the world." Donna felt something tighten in her chest, relief, maybe, or validation. "Is it strange?" she asked. "Maybe, but it's honest. And honestly, I think it's kind of beautiful." That made her smile, a real one. They sat together, sipping slowly, like old friends who had peeled away their masks without ever planning to. There was no need to explain more than that. For once, Donna didn't feel the pressure to justify herself, and that was the most freeing part of all. They left the cafe as the sun dipped lower behind the museum walls. The afternoon had slipped away quietly, like a conversation you don't want to end. Outside, the air felt lighter, warmer somehow, as if the weight they'd both been carrying was now shared. Tony walked beside Donna, matching her pace effortlessly, never rushing, never offering help she didn't ask for. He glanced over occasionally, not at her leg, not at the cast, but at her, like she was someone worth truly seeing. They passed a fountain, and Donna paused to rest. She sat on the edge, lifting her casted leg carefully, and looked up at the clouds turning golden. "I wasn't sure this trip would mean anything," she said, "but I think I'll remember it forever." "Me too," Tony replied. Then almost hesitantly, "Would you like to see more of the city tomorrow?" Donna smiled. "I'd like that." They exchanged numbers, and as Tony turned to leave, Donna watched him go with a feeling she hadn't expected to find here. Connection without confusion, clarity without explanation. That night, back at her hotel, she sat by the window with the cast still on, her crutches leaning silently beside her. She stared out at the city lights and let herself breathe. There was nothing shameful in what she had done, nothing broken, just curiosity followed to its natural end, and perhaps to a new beginning. The next morning, Donna awoke to soft sunlight spilling across the hotel room. Her casted leg rested on a stack of pillows, slightly numb from being in the same position all night. She flexed her toes slowly, and listened to the faint creaking of traffic below her window. She reached for her phone and found a message from Tony. "Hope you slept okay. If you're up for it, I know a quiet garden near the Capitol. Thought you might like it." She smiled and typed back a quick reply before heading to the bathroom to freshen up. Her reflection stared back at her, messy hair, sleepy eyes, and that now familiar cast. Only now, it didn't feel strange or fake. It just felt like part of the journey, a symbol of something she'd long kept buried. She dressed in a comfortable skirt, slipped her arms through the crutches, and made her way out into the morning sun. They met near the metro station, and walked she crutched, together through the quiet city street. The garden was tucked behind a row of townhouses, quiet and lush with green paths and benches. Donna found a spot beneath a blossoming tree and lowered herself onto the seat. They talked for hours, not just about casts or what brought them together, but about music, books, fears. Tony told her about growing up near DC, about his failed attempts at art school. She told him about her major, her family, her quiet battle with perfectionism. Neither of them mentioned the end of the trip, not yet, because for once, both of them were fully present. That afternoon passed in a blur of warmth and quiet laughter. As they sat together on a bench tucked beneath the soft canopy of trees, Donna caught herself watching the way Tony looked at her, not with pity, not with intrigue, but with something deeper, a kind of recognition. "You're easy to talk to," she said. "You too," he replied, pausing. "I think it's because we skipped all the small talk." Donna laughed gently. "We kind of did." The conversation drifted naturally. They shared childhood stories, fears that still crept in late at night, and strange moments of joy that made no sense to anyone else. It didn't feel like a first meeting. It felt like two people finally catching up after being apart for too long. At one point Donna caught Tony glancing at her cast again. She didn't mind. She touched it lightly with her hand, tracing the edge where it met her skin. "Still curious?" she asked with a smile. Tony didn't flinch. "Yeah," he said, "but not in the way you might think." "How then?" "I think I'm curious about the story behind it. Not just the cast itself, but what made you decide to do it." Donna tilted her head, thoughtful. "Maybe I just wanted to give myself permission to slow down, to be noticed differently, to let go of control." Tony nodded. "And did it work?" She looked down at her leg, then back at him. "I think so. Yeah." They fell into silence again, not awkward this time, but full like everything that needed to be said was already there between them. As the sun began to dip once more, Donna realized that she was no longer afraid of what came next, not because she had answers, but because she'd finally learned to listen to herself. That evening, they shared dinner at a quiet bistro just a few blocks from her hotel. The tables were small and candlelit, and soft jazz played overhead, blending into the clinking of glasses and silverware. Donna sat with her cast resting gently across a second chair, her crutches leaning by her side like silent companions. Tony listened intently as she described her university life, how she often buried herself in books, how she was always the good student, always controlled, until this trip. He nodded, understanding. So this cast, it's like a pause button for your life. She blinked, taken aback by the simplicity and truth of the metaphor. Yeah, that's exactly it. He leaned back, sipping his drink. It's brave, what you did. Donna laughed. I don't know if brave is the word most people would use. I would, he said firmly. Most people live their whole lives never questioning what they're supposed to do. You did something different. You explored a part of yourself that most would hide. She looked at him, surprised at how much that meant to her. Not because he approved, but because he understood. Later they strolled slowly down a quiet sidewalk, streetlights casting long shadows ahead of them. Donna moved with ease now despite the cast, as if her body had adapted, as if her mind had too. Tony walked beside her, not touching her, not guiding her, just there, present. When they reached the steps of her hotel, there was a pause. I'm glad I met you, she said softly. Me too, he answered. And there, under the soft glow of the city, nothing more needed to be said. Donna stood in front of the full-length mirror in her hotel room the next morning, still in her pajamas, staring at the cast that had become part of her daily life. It was strange, how something she had once thought of as just a fantasy, had become a lens through which she now understood herself better. She touched the edge of the plaster thoughtfully. It wasn't about being different anymore. It wasn't even about the cast itself. It was about the decision, the courage to explore a piece of herself she'd always tucked away, and the unexpected gift of connection that came from it. She pulled on a soft sweater and her favorite skirt, then adjusted the crutches under her arms, and headed to the lobby. Tony was already waiting. He held 2 coffees and a smile. Morning, he said. Morning, she replied, her voice soft but warm. They spent their final day together visiting quiet corners of the city, places Tony loved, but had never shared with anyone else. A forgotten garden behind a rooftop with a view of the Potomac, a tiny used bookstore with a sleepy orange cat sprawled across the philosophy section. They didn't rush. Every moment was taken slowly, purposefully, as if they both knew that speed would only blur the edges of something. And though they avoided talking about what would happen after Donna returned home, they both felt it hanging quietly between them, not as a burden but as a gentle reminder to stay present. Sometimes the best connections aren't built for forever. Sometimes, they exist to awaken something inside you. The sun was setting when Tony helped Donna into the cab outside her hotel. He didn't try to say too much. He just looked at her with that same calm, steady expression that had disarmed her from the start. I'm glad you came to he said. I'm glad you noticed me limping through that gallery, she replied, smiling. He chuckled. It wasn't the limp, it was the way you didn't hide it. She touched his hand. Just a second, just long enough. If I'm ever back here, I'll be waiting, he said. The cab pulled away slowly, and through the window she watched him shrink into the city. The moment was done, but what it gave her, what they gave each other, would last. Back on the plane, Donna looked out over the clouds, the cast still firm on her leg, but her spirit lighter than ever. There was no more need for fantasy. She had lived it, not the version filled with shame or hiding, but the version where truth met courage, and it had given her more than she expected. Clarity, confidence, and maybe something like love. When she landed and stepped back into the familiar rhythm of her life, the questions would come, the doubts too, but deep down she would always remember the week she lived completely on her own terms, and that was enough.